Have you ever stopped to wonder what life really looks like when the curtain drops, when the cameras shut off, when the photographers finally go home, and the sound of applause fades into silence? For someone like Johnny Depp, a man whose life has been lived under a spotlight for decades, that answer is not what you'd expect. His escape, his sanctuary, is tucked away in one of the most magical places on earth. Not in Hollywood. Not in Los Angeles. Not in London or New York. But in Italy. In the mystery of Venice, in the rolling hills of its countryside, and in dreams that reach as high as castle walls. This is not the Johnny the tabloids show you. This is not Captain Jack Sparrow, not the red carpet icon. This is Johnny stripped down to something simple, human, quiet. And maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. Picture Venice for a moment. The city is almost too unreal to describe, like it was designed by an artist instead of built by people. Narrow alleys that twist and turn, leading you into unexpected corners. Bridges arched delicately over silent canals, where gondolas glide without sound, carrying lovers, artists, and dreamers. At night, the lanterns flicker against weathered walls, casting shadows that look like they've been there forever. The city whispers stories from centuries ago, stories of romance, betrayal, power, and poetry. And in the middle of all this, there's Johnny. Not as the star everyone points at, but as a quiet figure, blending in with the rhythm of the place. He's been seen sitting in cafes that tourists rarely find, sipping an espresso, maybe lost in thought. Sometimes he's spotted with his guitar, strumming softly near the canals as though the water itself is listening. Can't you see it? A man who's lived through chaos, scandals, headlines, courtrooms, non-stop cameras, finally sitting down in a city that moves at its own pace, a city that refuses to rush. It's a contrast so sharp that it almost feels like a story written just for him. Venice is layered, complicated, full of shadows and light. And so is Johnny. That's why it fits. He doesn't have to perform here. He just has to exist. And maybe that's what he's been searching for all along. But Venice is only part of the story. Because outside its crowded alleys and its endless canals lies another side of Italy, one that speaks even louder to Johnny's spirit. The countryside. Rolling hills that look painted, vineyards that stretch for miles, old villages where time seems to have paused centuries ago. Life here is different. Slower. Softer. And this is where Johnny's biggest dream comes alive, the dream of a castle. Imagine that for a second. Not a shiny Hollywood mansion, not some glass skyscraper apartment, but a castle. Stone walls that echo with history. Towers that pierce the sky. Wooden doors that creak with age. Hallways filled with echoes of the past. For Johnny, who has always been fascinated with antiques, with stories, with objects that hold memories, this is more than a building. It's a sanctuary. Think of him walking across the courtyard of a castle as the sun sets, his footsteps echoing. Or sitting by a grand fireplace, sketching, writing lyrics, strumming a guitar. Outside, the hills are quiet. The vines sway gently in the evening breeze. This isn't about showing off. It isn't about luxury. It's about finding a place that feels alive with history, a place where the walls themselves seem to whisper inspiration. Johnny has always been more than just an actor. He's a collector of stories, a maker of music, an artist in his own right. A castle is the perfect home for a man who sees life not as a timeline but as a tapestry. Now let's pause here for a moment. When you think about celebrities, what's the picture that usually comes to mind? Flashing lights, luxury yachts, endless parties, jets waiting at airports, a kind of life that's big, loud, and impossible to ignore. That's the myth, isn't it? That's the fantasy. But Johnny's Italian life? It's the opposite. It's quiet. It's simple. It's rooted in the everyday things that actually matter. Shopping for fresh tomatoes and basil at a local market. Learning the rhythm of the language. Cooking pasta with ingredients that came from just a few steps away. Pouring a glass of red wine while the sunset paints the sky orange and pink. Playing a song for no one but himself. Talking with friends, not for headlines, not for cameras, but just because the company feels good. That's the image that surprises people the most. Because if anyone had a reason to chase the biggest, loudest life possible, it's Johnny Depp. And yet, he's choosing the quiet life. What does that tell us? It tells us something profound. It tells us that sometimes, the thing we spend our lives chasing, attention, fame, validation, isn't really what makes us happy. Sometimes happiness is hiding in the simplest of places. In silence. In peace. In belonging. And maybe that's the real reason his life in Italy feels so magnetic to fans. Because deep down, all of us are chasing that too. We might not want a castle, but we want the same peace. We might not walk through Venice at night with cameras trailing us, but we know the feeling of wanting to step away from chaos, to just breathe, to just be. Johnny's story in Italy isn't just about him. It's about all of us. Locals in Italy talk about how he blends in. He doesn't act like a tourist. He doesn't demand special treatment. He shops where they shop. He talks with them. He respects their traditions. And because of that, they treat him like one of their own. Not a star. Not a headline. Just a neighbor. That's rare. Most celebrities could never pull that off. But Johnny can, because underneath it all, he's always been more comfortable being an outsider than being the center of the party. There's also something magical about Italy for artists. Writers, painters, and musicians have always been drawn here. It's like the air itself carries inspiration. Maybe it's the cathedrals, maybe it's the paintings, maybe it's just the way the light falls on old buildings. But people say when you live here, something in your creativity changes. You become more connected, more grounded, more real. And for Johnny, who has always been more than the roles he plays, that influence is impossible to miss. His music feels different now. His projects feel deeper. It's like the country itself is shaping his art. So let's imagine him one night. Sitting in a small courtyard of a castle. The air is cool, carrying the scent of olive trees and fresh earth. The stars are spread across the sky, brighter than they ever are in the city. He holds his guitar, plays a few notes, and lets the sound carry into the night. There's no crowd. No flashing lights. No one demanding a photo or a headline. Just Johnny and the music. Just the sound of strings echoing into the dark, mixing with the whisper of the wind. That's the life he's building. That's the life that makes sense. It almost feels like there's a lesson here. That maybe the dream isn't always the loudest one. Maybe it's not about being seen, but about feeling alive. Maybe it's not about the size of your audience, but the size of your peace. For Johnny, Venice Nights and Castle Dreams are not escapes. They're choices. Choices to live differently. Choices to live honestly. And maybe that's the most inspiring part of this story. Because if someone who has had everything the world tells us we should want, fame, wealth, attention, chooses instead to chase simplicity, then maybe we should ask ourselves what we're really chasing. Maybe the thing we think we want isn't the thing we actually need. Now think about this. If you had the chance to live in Italy, what would you choose? Would you lose yourself in the mystery of Venice, with its canals, its shadows, its quiet nights? Or would you retreat to a countryside castle, surrounded by hills, with silence stretching in every direction? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because deep down, both choices are about the same thing. They're about peace. They're about belonging. They're about living a life that feels like your own. Johnny Depp has found that in Italy. And maybe that's why his secret life there captures so much imagination. Because it's not just his story. It's ours too. It's the story of everyone who dreams of something quieter, something simpler, something real. And that's the Johnny most people will never see. Not the actor, not the star, but the man sitting quietly in Venice, or walking through the halls of a castle, or strumming his guitar under the stars. That's the real Johnny. And maybe, in some way, that's the real dream.